Welcome to a candidate forum for Mayor of Sacramento. The candidates for mayor are Kevin McCarty and Flo Kofer. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Sacramento County and the Sacramento Metro Cable Television Commission. I'm Paula Lee, a member of the League of Women Voters, and I'll moderate the forum. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization of women and men. We work at the local, state, and national level to encourage informed and active participation in government. The League does not support or oppose political candidates or parties. However, we do take positions on legislation, ballot measures, and we speak out on local governmental issues informed by our positions and our studies. If you're interested in public policy or just want to support our volunteer work, we invite you to join the League. The League is open to everyone. The format today for this forum will be as follows. Candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement and 2 minutes to answer the questions in rotating order, and also 2 minutes for a closing statement. The League timer is volunteer Lexi Tesh. She's in the front row, candidates. And you know the drill. She'll give you the 30-second sign so you can wrap up your comments and the stop sign. Now we begin with opening statements from Kevin McCarty. Kevin?
Thank you. 3 minutes, correct?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, tighten it up. Yes, thank you, League of Women Voters and Metro Cable 14 for hosting us once again to talk to the people of Sacramento about a big upcoming election. You know, we have a big national election, but they say all politics are local. So this is an important election for the future of Sacramento. And I ask the voters of Sacramento to, first of all, ask for your consideration, hope to earn your vote in the coming weeks. But I ask you the question of what do we want to see in Sacramento in the next year and 8 years from now? Because I ask myself that question all the time. And I ask my question, and I think about that issue when I look at my twin daughters who are in high school. You see, they were walking home from school in middle school and had to dodge around encampments and sometimes dogs on leashes trying to get home. And I wasn't pleased by the response for the city of Sacramento in addressing that issue. I wanted a more sense of urgency today. So I'm running for mayor to bring my experience, my practical experience as a city housing commissioner, as a council member, as an assembly member, to bring about common sense solutions to these issues. But I also think about my teenage daughters who are 16, 8 years from now. Usually mayors serve about 2 terms, 8 years from now. And I want to focus on what's the city going to look like in 8 years. Are we going to have enough housing to meet all the residents of Sacramento? Are we going to make sure we address issues so we have a thriving economy? Are we going to have safe neighborhoods? Are we going to make sure that we have clean streets? Are we going to make sure we have a thriving economy and a fun city with arts and sports and entertainment? So that's what I'm looking for in this election, a conversation about the future of Sacramento. I'm going to bring all of my skills, my problem-solving skills that I've brought to my hometown city of Sacramento, and hopefully earn your vote in the coming weeks, and look forward to the conversation before us this morning. Thank you.
Flo Kofer.
Hello, thank you so much to the League of Women Voters and to Metro 14. My name is Dr. Flo Kofer, and I am running for mayor of Sacramento. I am a public health professional, and I'm also the daughter of 2 public school teachers. And I moved to Sacramento 20 years ago because of a fellowship at the Department of Public Health. And I fell in love with Sacramento for many of the reasons that we all love it here. The diverse communities with wonderful food and close-knit neighborhoods. The fact that we can always find something to do in Sacramento, and that this is a place where people roll up their sleeves and get involved. It's more than just the Sacramento Kings that make us proud to be here. And at the same time, Amidst all of the things we love, there also are big challenges facing our city. We are leading the nation in homelessness and our housing crisis, and not in the way that Sacramento likes to lead the nation with cutting-edge state policy. And so many of our young people are asking themselves, is there a future for them here? And can they stay in the place where they are surrounded by people they love in a wonderful city, but also are they able to see themselves having a future here with their families in a way that allows them to be able to experience health and well-being? And so we need new leadership in Sacramento, leadership that listens to us, respects us, partners with us, and has a vision for where Sacramento can go. I have been working in Sacramento for the last 20 years at the federal, state, and local level, passing policy that impacts our lives. At the federal level, making sure that after the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, was passed, that we had preventive services for women, including birth control with no copay. At the state level, working with diverse coalitions to lower our infant mortality rate by 14%. And at the local level, making sure that during COVID, we worked with our public defenders and our public health departments to stand up our COVID response. There are so many opportunities here to be able to build on what's great about Sacramento and lead us forward in a way that is effective, that maximizes our strengths and allows us to be able to work better together to shape our future. And that's why I'm asking for your vote by November 5th.
Thank you. Okay, we'll begin the first question with you, Kevin McCarty. Kevin, how would you define the job of mayor of Sacramento?
That's a great question. And fortunately, I know what I'm getting myself into. A lot of people have said, Kevin, why are you doing this job? Have you seen Darrell Steinberg? It's a miserable job. It is a tough job. And I'm ready for the challenge. I'm ready to use my experience. And that's one of the benefits of this. I've been in this position. I know how the city council works. I know how the mayor works. So I've worked under 3 mayors. I've seen it up close. I know how to partner. So the job of a mayor is a collaborator and a leader. You want to set the vision for the city of Sacramento, set the tone, and work to get your council, city staff, and others going together. I'm a big believer in the African proverb, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together with others. So that's been my approach in my whole career, working with others to bring about results to problems. And so as the mayor of Sacramento, we certainly have the opportunity to be elected citywide, but we're 1 of 9, so we need to work with others. So I'm pleased in the majority of the city council who have engaged in this race have endorsed our candidacy, as have the majority of the board of supervisors, as have the assembly delegation, because you need to work with our regional and local leaders to solve problems. Here, for example, we're in the County Board of Supervisors chamber. We're going to talk, I'm sure, about homelessness in a few moments. We can't solve this issue alone. We need to work in partnership. Last year, the grand jury came out and talked about the lack of our collaborative response on the issue of homelessness. So I want to make sure we have a new day, a new partnership, form a regional joint powers authority to work on issues like homelessness. So the mayor certainly drives the city, brings the council together, kind of like a point guard in a basketball team or a quarterback, but also you are the voice for Sacramento and sometimes the region, and you need to work with others to bring about results. Thank you.
Flo, how would you define the job of mayor of Sacramento?
I love this question because it gets to the heart of our understanding of our community. And I think the mayor is the chief partner in our community, the person who is bringing together diverse coalitions of people to be able to be seen and heard. The benefit of local government is that, unlike in our presidential election, you can reach out and have coffee with us. You can have a conversation with us. We have neighborhood associations and nonprofits in our business community that we can actually sit down and partner with. And I think that's one of the untapped resources that we have here in Sacramento, is that people here really care and they have really fantastic expertise that could help us solve our challenges, but we have not built the pathways to be able to hear their voices. So the role of the mayor is to be able to have a vision, not just for where we want Sacramento to go, but how we do that together. And because I have executive leadership experience, it's different than serving as an elected legislator, right? Running a campaign or being one of 120 people is different than having the experience of having set goals for an organization and then actually having to hold employees accountable for that. Unlike at the state level, we are actually the supervisors of our city attorney and our city clerk and our city manager and our city treasurer. And so we have a different responsibility, and bringing to bear my decade-long experience being an executive is important to the role of the mayor. You're one of 9 votes, but you have a very important role of setting the agenda and making sure that the business of the city is done in a way that ensures implementation. And that's one of the things that has been lacking in the city of Sacramento, the lack of goals, the lack of clear strategic focus so that we can actually work together. I think there are great people here who are doing tremendous work and putting in a lot of effort, but effort can be wasted if it's not towards a strategic goal and we're not bringing people together. And as a public health professional with executive leadership experience, that's what I think many Sacramentans are looking for in their next mayor.
Okay, next question for you, Flo Kofer. Back to homelessness. This was, of course, the #1 issue in the questions that we received. So solving homelessness, what's working, what's not, for the business people in the community and also for those without housing. And what does success look like?
I love this because one of the challenges in our region is that we haven't actually defined what success looks like. So I'd like to share with you some concrete goals, because I think if we don't set concrete goals, we don't have a way to be able to mobilize resources toward them. When we talk about homelessness, we're talking about a diverse group of people. Everyone from people who have jobs, who are living in their cars or are couch surfing, to those with major mental health and maybe even substance use issues. And so that is a diverse population, and we need different resources to be able to address it. So what I would like to do is to work together with our street medicine folks, with our folks in our emergency departments and our county jail and our 911 response and police and fire, to be able to mobilize and connect people to the resources they need so that those 200 hardest to reach people who are often chronically experiencing homelessness can actually get into permanent supportive housing. And I'd like to do that within the next few years because of their utilization, those folks are actually costing us a lot of money, and we're on this ongoing hamster wheel where we're not actually addressing the challenges needed and stabilizing. And then there are people who need a leg up, people who, if we had had just a small pot of money like we did during COVID, we could have saved them from evictions and kept them in their housing. And so I want to make sure that we have an emergency fund in the city of Sacramento for one-time dollars to be able to keep people housed. I want to make sure that the people who currently have jobs that we can actually marry resources with are able to get into housing. And I want to focus on the 1,500 kids and families with kids. And by the end of my first term, I think we can work together with our school system and with our county and with our nonprofit and business partners to make sure that we get those folks into housing. And in doing so, we will then create momentum. We will learn from our successes and from the things that can be improved upon, and we'll be able to better tackle the remaining people who are experiencing homelessness. It's a strategic plan with very clear goals and outcomes and mobilizing resources to make the business community and our broader neighborhoods a much safer for everyone.
Kevin McCarty.
Thank you. Well, clearly it is the issue of the campaign. No matter where we go, this is what people want to talk about. And it's not working in Sacramento for neighborhoods, for businesses, for residents, for kids walking home from school, which is why I decided to run for mayor. You know, I saw my kids dodging encampments while we were tracking them on their phone to make sure they got home safely, and no parent should have to deal with that. It's not bad. It's not good for neighborhoods, nor is it good for homeless individuals. So what's working, what's not working? That's what I'm going to do day one when I'm mayor, is I'm going to call an audit of our city homeless spending. We spend about $25-30 million a year in homeless response. I don't think there's anything nefarious going on, but we need to focus on what programs are working and what's not, because our problems are this tall, our resources are this tall. So we have an imbalance as far as solutions and the problem to address. So we need to focus on, smarter, more cost-effective places to put individuals. So that should be priority number one. I do support enforcing the no camping laws in the city of Sacramento. We can't allow urban camping in our city parks. We can't allow urban camping in our neighborhoods, and we can't allow it in our communities throughout the city of Sacramento. We need to partner more, as I said in my opening, with the county of Sacramento. First of all, the county has 10 times more resources in the city. our county grand jury said it's one of the faults of our homeless response of lack of coordination. We need to make sure we use the county more for behavioral health issues and addiction. And I want to make sure Sacramento is first in line when we get our Prop 1 dollars to build more state facilities to focus on homeless individuals that have behavioral health issues. Because I believe we should have compulsory treatment for some individuals that are languishing on the streets and don't have a place to go and clearly have untreated mental health issues. So we are all in this together. We didn't get in this overnight. We need to look for collaborative solutions. Our incoming council member and I, Phil Pluckybaum, recently went to San Antonio to look for Haven for Hope and that model. So there are different programs throughout the nation, and we need to focus on our best practices here in Sacramento.
Okay, Kevin McCarty. Air quality improvement and greenhouse gas reductions are urgent regional goals. What should voters expect from you on environmental and climate change action?
Yes, I love this question because I served here in this chair on the Air Quality Management District, and it is a big issue here in Sacramento. When we think about climate change, you think about the issues of think globally, act locally. So we want to address climate change for the planet, but here in Sacramento, we have a very unique issue. Not only is climate change impacting us with heat and weather incidents, but also we live in this bathtub here, and so we have terrible air quality. We have some of the worst air in the nation. We've gotten much better, but we need to stay at it. So I think the city of Sacramento can be a laboratory to implement policies that focus on clean air and tackling climate change. The first and foremost is transportation. Most of our mobile sources contribute to the majority of the problematic emissions, and so what can we do to get people out of their cars? Public transportation. I support going to the county, either the county-wide or cities within the county, to do another regional sales tax measure to expand public transportation so people can make those choices. I also think we need to do a much better job of making sure our streets aren't just for automobiles. We need to make sure they're safe for pedestrians. I know we're all tired of reading every week or so about a fatality with a bike versus a car, and we need to make sure that as we look forward, we have dedicated bike lanes and safe areas for people to make that choice, not just in the affluent areas, but when you see the tragic accidents, many times there are neighborhoods where people have to ride a bike. They don't have choices. I also think the city can be leaders in electrification of both businesses, residential, as well as continuing the rollout of EV infrastructure. One of the things I want to focus on is right here in our central city. A lot of people live in apartments. We need to make sure that the city steps up and uses our street lights, our infrastructure for curbside charging, so we can make sure that our EV infrastructure is rolled out equitably to all neighborhoods throughout Sacramento. Thank you.
Flo Kofer.
Yes, this is a really great question, in part because, the Sacramento region has been rated F by the American Lung Association for our air quality. And so we do have some major challenges to address. And it's one of the reasons why I was pleased when our current mayor, Darrell Steinberg, appointed me to the Joint Mayor's Climate Action Commission. It was a joint effort between our West Sacramento mayor across the river in a different county and the city of Sacramento. And the goal was to put together a plan for what we could do. So many of the policies we already worked on during that time on the commission, and we came out with reports. And the challenge, once again, with the city of Sacramento is always, how are we going to implement the plans we put in place? And it's a longstanding challenge in our region that we put together great plans. We have brilliant minds here, but we don't actually follow the swing all the way through. And so that's what my commitment is. My commitment is to looking at our climate action plan and saying every single year, what are we going to implement to get us closer to having cleaner air and cleaner water and to protecting our environment? How are we working on some of those electrification goals that we've already outlined? We don't need new policies. What we need is to implement the plans that our community members and experts in the region have already put together. And that's where, again, being both a public health professional who has quantitative experience as well as an executive leader who comes to the table saying, what are we going to accomplish and how do we budget towards that is the thing that our region is desperately in need of. We have a budget budget process every year. We set out policies every year that we are going to champion, and I want to see us connect the dots between what we've said are our highest aspirations and what our policies actually look like. When we're having events here, are we partnering with RT to make sure that people can reduce their car trips and actually take transit? Are we doing wayfinding for our bikes and pedestrians for every single Kings game or events that we're having? The A's are coming to town. Are we actually making sure that we're following through on the things that will help people get outside of cars and get into alternative transportation? That's the role that our city needs to take on, and I'm fully prepared to do that given my experience.
All right, we begin this question with you, Flo. Policing policies and practices have been at the forefront of public discussion and review in recent years. How do you define public safety? And what may need to change, if anything, to build trust that law enforcement will serve all communities more equitably?
The question that we struggle with. And as a woman, I experience safety very differently than many of the men in our community do. And it's one of the reasons why I am a public safety candidate. I would argue that I am the public safety candidate because I recognize that public safety is more than just emergency response. If we were to talk about healthcare and I said to you, our healthcare system is our emergency department, you would say, no, it includes primary care and public health and all the other ways that we keep ourselves healthy. Well, so does public safety. And emergency response is certainly an important part of public safety, but it is not the only part. And unfortunately, our city hasn't quite decided to invest in full-on public safety. Being able to move throughout our community, transportation, without being harmed is public safety. Being able to prevent some of the things that are happening in our community from happening is public safety. We lived in a city where we had 2 years with no youth homicides because we invested in violence prevention and intervention programs that were successful, that were single-digit $1 million of investment that got us 2 years without any young people losing their lives, without empty seats at graduations and people crying over open graves because they lost their peers. That is a huge success that our city should have championed and continued, but instead we pivoted away from things that are working. So I don't want to just respond after something bad happens to you. I want to make sure that fewer bad things happen. And that's why I'm supportive of our Department of Community Response actually having the staffing it needs to be able to help. Because there was a story recently of a couple that had an attempted break-in, and the police did what they could. They came and they issued a trespassing ticket. But I don't think it makes any of us feel really good to be told, hey, we're sending this person away hoping they don't come back. Where are the people who actually help to reduce the likelihood that someone comes back and gets help? That's safety, and that's how we work in our communities. And when we actually focus on safety, we can actually build trust within our communities to be able to heal some of these long-standing harms and mistrust and actually improve the well-being and experience of being in Sacramento.
Kevin McCarty?
Thank you. That is a key issue as we go around the city of Sacramento, public safety. So I think two things can be true. You can demand more accountability and smart police reforms and also adequately fund our police department. So on the former, I was a leader in that. After Stephon Clark's death, after the summer of George Floyd, I worked with our legislature and our then U.S. Senator Kamala Harris implementing programs to have independent investigations for law enforcement on police shootings, bringing about new policies for use of force and responding to individuals in our community, bringing about less lethal force. So I believe that we need to continue pushing on that. Sacramento has lit on that. We've had very few incidents of officer-involved shootings, high profile since that. I think that our policies and practices have improved, but I would continue to push that forward. On the issue of adequately funding our policing, I would just our residents and our voters out there to remember these two numbers, 67 and 49. In the last 15 years, the city of Sacramento has grown by 67,000 more people. Think of North Natomas. Think of the central city. At the same time, the number of police officers have decreased by 49. So I think going forward, we need to adequately fund our police department. Our grand jury said it's a crisis last year because we don't have adequate staffing to focus on our patrol. So I support working with the budget to, as we get new revenues in the city, to go back to the 15 years ago and adequately fund our police department, not reduce public safety funding. It's an issue that, we never want to have to call 911. Some of us have. I certainly have to over the years. I've had to over the years. You want to make sure that someone's able to respond. Again, two things can be true. We can support smart reforms and adequately fund our policing. Lastly, I do also believe that, we'll come back to that.
Kevin? First name's okay?
Yes.
All right. Some community members serving on boards and commissions suggest their work is minimalized by the city council they are responsible to advise. And we've lost some good people. How can we improve the experience of those who volunteer to serve on our boards and commissions? And how can the mayor and council benefit from their experience and recommendations?
Yeah, I love this question because I was a city commissioner. That's how I got my start in city government. I was appointed to the City Housing and Redevelopment Commission. First of all these commissions, except for the planning commissions, are advisory. So you have to remember that you're giving advice. There's no binding a mantra that the council must adopt your recommendations. But they're important. We ask people to serve and come up with recommendations and help hopefully have the city council make better decisions. I'll give you an example. When I was back then as a city commissioner, we had a big issue with slumlords running havoc in a couple neighborhoods throughout the city, including Oak Park and Tao Park. So I worked on a task force with that housing commission, came up with some recommendations to hold absentee landlords accountable to make them clean up their properties. We took that recommendation to the city council. The city council adopted that recommendation, and we cleaned up thousands of neglected rental properties in the city of Sacramento after that and continue to do so since. So these city commissions are valuable. We have city commissions on air quality issues, on parks issues, on bike and pedestrian issues, on a multitude of opportunities for people to serve. So we owe it to listen to our commissioners, but also these individuals serving on commissions aren't doing it for fame nor fortune. I know Dr. Flo did so when she came to Sacramento because she cared about Sacramento, and people have expertise. So I think we owe it and need to respect their work. But again, the council at the end of the day makes these decisions. We're elected to make these decisions, but we need to basically bring out the most in our city commissioners. And most importantly, we want people to keep applying for those city commissions as well. Thank you.
Flo?
Yeah, I love this question because I actually tried to tackle it when I was a commissioner. So I served, as mentioned, on the Climate Commission, but also on Active Transportation, and 4 terms as the chair for the Measure U Community Advisory Committee. And during the time, I started recognizing that we had some structural issues. It's absolutely true that the majority of our commissions, except planning, are advisory. But that means that they're offering advice. And so when Marge Dickinson and I had to present our first Measure U recommendations during 2 minutes of public comment and weren't even given the full respect and dignity of being able to give a full presentation, that's not respectful of our commissioners' time. When we don't allow them to be able to have agendized recommendations after they've taken time out to volunteer to serve in our communities, that's not respectful of their time. So there's an order of operations issue that's happening here. Often, as the Budget Advisory Committee, we weren't allowed to see the budget until it had already been presented to the council, and sometimes they started voting on things. How do you incorporate advice if you're getting the advice after you've already made decisions? That doesn't make logical sense. So part of what I'd like to see us do is something that I know the Assembly member is really familiar with. It's basically mirroring the process that we have at the state, where our mayor and our council members and our department chairs can introduce legislation. So we know what people are thinking about doing, and we're not surprised on a Thursday when the agenda is posted that something's coming up. And then from there, we actually use our advice advisors is the first opportunity for our communities to have conversations about something, to offer amendments, to offer their expertise and advice. We've had the chair of the Metro Chamber sitting on the Measure U committee with me, along with regional experts, and we're ignoring the free advice that our city has. It doesn't make sense. And then from there, it comes to the council for us to make the final decision. Yes, but we agendize those recommendations. We respect the people who've offered their expertise for free, and we do this in a way that makes sense and allows the city of Sacramento to have the benefit of the best advice possible. And that's what I'd like to do as your next mayor.
Flo, as mayor, what actions will you take to ensure there is ongoing and productive collaboration between the city and the county on our most pressing problems?
Yeah, I think this question is really important because it is one of the challenges that we have. And thankfully, I come from a background in public health. You know, public health is about the two things that matter most to humans: the number of years in our life and the quality of life in our years. And we have been able to achieve things like doubling the life expectancy in the 20th century without having a lot of authority or very much money. And so it sounds a lot like the role of the mayor in that you are one of many and you have to be able to collaborate to get things done. And so that's what my background and expertise is. I've worked with the county. I've worked with the folks who are working actually on housing and homelessness. And until just a few weeks ago, I was the technical assistance provider for the accreditation process for the County Department of Public Health. And so what I know is all of the work that's already happening across the aisle that just needs some coordination. The city cannot fund our response to housing and homelessness or many of our regional challenges alone. We have a $1.7 billion budget, and only about $700 million of it is general fund, and many of that's already committed to some of our labor contracts and other just ongoing services. But the role that we can play is setting concrete goals and being able to identify how all of our partners, including our county partners, can be a good participant in those goals. And that's the part that's been missing. And so we have now opportunities to be able to have joint meetings. I actually chaired those when I was a Measure U commissioner between us and the Police Review Commission, because they were working on policy for policing and we had a good chunk of their budget, and it made sense for us to coordinate. So we need to be able to have a joint meeting, not just a 4x2, but an actual joint meeting where we're able to allocate resources and pass policy together so we're not undercutting each other, so the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. And we need to include our PBIDs, our business improvement districts, in those conversations, and our neighborhood associations and our nonprofits. So, and even our regional foundations, because so many of them are investing dollars and time in some of the things we're trying to do, and better coordination will allow us to be able to do it more effectively and efficiently.
Kevin?
Thank you. That's such a key issue. I mentioned this earlier. It's a strength of mine running for mayor, and hopefully when I am the mayor of Sacramento, is I have the majority of the Board of Supervisors endorsing my candidacy, because I've worked with them on issues, because we can't do this alone. As our Sacramento grand jury noted with our homeless response, we need to have more cooperation. You know, we have regional boards and commissions on cable, obviously Metro Cable, regional boards and commissions on regional transit, public transportation, air quality, our library, our wastewater, solid waste, but not on the issue of the day, homelessness. So one thing that I want to do is bring our regional governments together to work on this, because homelessness and homeless individuals don't know boundaries. We're all in this together. So I've worked with our county supervisors. I work with Supervisor Cerna to create the American River Parkway, to bring about resources to clean up our parkway. I work with Supervisor Kennedy to enact legislation to expand drug treatment for people going into our county jail, so that while they're serving their sentence, they're addressing the number one issue while they're there in the first place, drug addiction. I worked recently with Supervisor Desmond to bring $25 million to this county to expand homelessness response for people along the parkway. And so this is something that I have practical experience working with, and we need to make sure we partner and bring our resources together. And then lastly, I'm a collaborator by nature. As I said earlier, I believe in the mantra, you want to go fast, you go alone. You want to go far, you go with others. You're not going to see me as mayor having big declarations, pointing fingers at our regional jurisdictions. I'm going to sit down and work with them together and talk with them so we can walk in unison solving these problems. Because we have big problems in Sacramento. Homelessness, lack of affordable housing, lack of public transportation, addressing public safety, our regional economy. And we need somebody who has the skill set working with others to tackle these issues in partnership. And that's what I'll do as mayor of Sacramento.
And Kevin, what are your priorities for the city budget moving forward, considering the current shortfall and the predicted future of budget deficits?
Well, first of all, I think we should all be really troubled by the fact that we have a budget deficit that's in the 40 million-ish range. It's hard to predict. Because we're not facing a drop in revenue. I was on the city council in the 2009-10-ish when we had the Great Recession. Massive drops in sales tax, property tax, massive foreclosures. We had to lay off police officers, shut fire stations, shut down swimming pools. And I led the effort to put Measure U on the ballot to restore those services because it was so painful a few years later. So now we're facing this budget deficit when we're not facing declines in revenue. So it makes you scratch your head saying, is the city spending one-time money on ongoing needs? And I'm going to use my experience having chaired the State Budget Committee for Education for 9 years to look under the hood and see what's going on. And use my experience as a former council member to see what we are doing and focus on the priorities. Because the simple math is this. The discretionary general fund budget for the city of Sacramento, 85% of it is based upon three things: police, fire, parks and recreation. We need to make sure we're focusing on our core issues. And when we have to make budget cuts, I'll make sure we prioritize the core and focus on other programs that aren't necessarily our top priority. So I don't think it's going to be viable to go to the voters and tax them again. They recently said no in March. So what do we do to grow our economy? I think that should be our focus. I'm focusing on streamlining our building permits in Sacramento so people want to develop and build new housing in Sacramento. I'm working to implement my law to turn these vacant state buildings downtown into more housing. 45% of the buildings downtown pay zero property taxes because they're state buildings. A lot of them are vacant now because they're remote work. So how do we turn those buildings into something productive like needed affordable housing at the same time putting them on the tax rolls? I'm a big supporter of expanding our Aggie Square project over in Oak Park and Tile Park to bring more non-state jobs in the sciences and healthcare to Sacramento. So we need to grow our economy so we can grow our budget accordingly.
Flo?
Yeah, I'm really annoyed as well about the fact that we are in a budget deficit, because when I first served on the Measure U committee and I joined in 2019, we had a 5-year budget projection. And we knew that when we got to 2024, we were going to have a deficit. And so knowing that you're heading towards a cliff and then not taking the appropriate steps is a real failure of leadership. And so I'm frustrated that our budgets didn't adjust over the intervening 5 years to be able to do something different, especially because, going back to our previous question about boards and commissions, our commission actually expanded our role and gave broader recommendations given what we saw as the fiscal forecast for our city. We said, look, City of Sacramento, you paid $300,000 to a consultant to be able to get 39 recommendations for how you could possibly streamline services and save money. I know it can be hard to prioritize among 39 recommendations, but here are 5 or 6 that you could start with that could potentially streamline our operations and save money without having to have the hard conversations about cutting different services and scaling back in ways. In a $1.7 billion budget, you can always find ways that you can save money. There's not every single dollar is being spent as efficiently as it can be. And so here was an opportunity that we'd already paid for recommendations, and we didn't take them on. So yes, I would like to streamline some of the inefficiencies within our city to be able to help us save dollars, to be able to allocate dollars where they're needed. When we talked about public safety, they've had the highest increase in expenditures over the last few years, and yet 32% of their time is not being spent on criminal calls. So is that the most efficient use of their time, especially if it's time and a half, because now we're paying overtime? So when we talk about not having enough officers, the question is, do we not have enough officers, or would we be fine if our officers were spending 100% of their time on police duties instead of doing the job of code enforcement and of the Department of Community Response and of homeless services and all of these other things that could be purchased for cheaper? And so that's what I'd like to see us do while we also grow our economy's revenue.
All right, Flo, What strategies and or policies will you forward to reduce gun violence in our city? And let me just say, as moderator, if you can reduce your 2 minutes to 1 minute, we'll have more time for questions. Don't want to rush you, though.
Great. This is one of the questions that we already have an answer for, which is we had 2 years without youth homicides from 2017 to 2020. So we already have a blueprint for Sacramento, not some other place that we have to go and visit to learn what happened, but right here. And we did that by having our nonprofit partners work together. And even the recent reductions we've seen in crime, our police chief has credited to the partnerships with nonprofits. So we have a model that works, and that's where I'd want to invest in making sure that they're working succinctly with one another and having the outcomes that we have already proven can take place in Sacramento.
Kevin?
As a young council member, there was one call I didn't like getting. It was from our police chief on Saturday nights, that when they called me and told me a young person was shot dead. And I heard that call too many times. So I worked with our then former sheriff, back then the only Republican on the city council, Robbie Waters, to write laws going after illegal gun traffickers in Sacramento. Our police chief supported that law, and we reduced illegal purchases of guns and ammunition by hundreds in Sacramento and became basis for a state law as well. So I've been leading on this issue for years. It's the reason I was sued by the NRA a number of years ago, and I'll continue to lead in the city of Sacramento. I too think that we need to focus on intervention programs. That's why I'm proud to support and help fund the Brother to Brother program, focusing on young individuals that had a run-in with a firearm, because those are the individuals later that are going to become the victims or the shooters. So where can we focus on successful, proven gun violence prevention programs? Lastly, I wrote the law that's bringing down hundreds of millions of dollars across the state to cities to fund these anti-gun violence or gun violence prevention programs. And I'll make sure Sacramento is first in line to get our resources here for our community. Thank you.
Okay, Kevin, what is your plan for addressing affordable housing? And as mayor, how will you ensure each council district does its part in providing both affordable and low-income housing?
Sacramento's been a leader in being a pro-housing city. I'll continue to do so. But one of our flaws is the building department. It's too cumbersome and painful to get a building permit. So on day one, I'm going to have a blue ribbon commission focusing on recommendations to remove barriers. So developers, affordable housing, and all income levels will say, you know what? Let's come to Sacramento, not West Sac or Stockton or Vacaville. Let's focus on the capital city. We need to make it easier and cut red tape to build here. Secondly, I mentioned earlier, I want to utilize our vacant state land. We have all these dozens of state buildings here underutilized now, especially after the pandemic, people working from home, and we can turn those vacant lots into housing, provide affordable housing, and most importantly, get those buildings on the tax rolls and develop more money to fund housing. And lastly, I support going back and having a dedicated revenue source like we had with redevelopment. Unfortunately, that was lost 14 years ago. So support going to the voters and having a conversation about having a dedicated revenue source to build more needed affordable housing in Sacramento.
Flo?
Yes, I'm really proud because just this past Tuesday, our city passed the interim missing middle housing ordinance, the first in the state. And so once again, Sacramento is a leader on some of these issues, and it's really great to be able to see. And so yes, we need to be thinking about how we build more affordable housing at the price points that people here can afford. How do we get more workforce housing? How are we making sure that we have co-ops and that we're using deed restrictions and every single possible opportunity we have to be able to build more housing? And part of that is certainly streamlining city operations, making sure that the timelines that occur between each step of the process are fixed so that we're not increasing the cost per door simply because we weren't responsive as a city in a timely fashion and we drove up the interest costs. I've talked to developers that have had $60,000 and $70,000 in interest just because the city had delays in responding to things that were under our purview. And so that's part of what we need to do. But the other part is that we need to make sure that we're partnering with our city council members to do real community engagement and outreach so that people are supportive of these projects, because most people in Sacramento see this as the #1 issue and want to be a part of the solution.
Flo, there's been a lot of talk recently about the city manager's salary and role. What is your understanding of your role as mayor versus the role of the city manager?
That's a great question. So the role of the mayor and council is to be the supervisor of our city staff, which include our charter officers and of course our city manager is one of them. And so that is a responsibility that has not always been done in a way that someone with executive leadership experience would do. We would set goals first and foremost for our city. When I first joined the Measure U committee, I sat down with Assistant City Manager Lainey Milstein and asked her about the city's priorities, and she laughed and said, "We don't have any." She showed me the process that was outlined on page 34 of our budget and then flipped to the next page and said they've never used it. So step one for me is making sure that we do our responsibility, because if you ever have challenges with what somebody is doing who's a staff member, your first question needs to be to yourself, have I done my job as a manager? And I think the answer here is we haven't provided good guidance. We haven't said where we're going. We have made our staff wait week to week to find out what their jobs are going to be, and that's frustrating and inefficient. So we set goals for the city, and then we set performance goals for each of our staff so they know what their role is and how they can be held accountable. And that's one of the ways to be able to make sure we're working better, and that's the role of the mayor and the council.
Kevin?
Well, big picture, I support the structure of having the city manager form of government as opposed to the strong mayor. The voters have voted that down a number of times. I've supported opposing those measures, and I'm fine with the current system. I think the people of Sacramento want to have power distributed throughout our council members. They don't want to have one individual put too much weight and their thumb on the scale. Cities with the strong mayors have, more instances of corruption. So I support our current system. The city council is essentially a board of directors and hires a CEO, the city manager, to implement the council's vision, whether that's policies on policing, our city parks, our neighborhoods, my idea as far as streamlining our permitting process. The city manager oversees all of that. The city manager essentially is unelected, but is one of the persons, more day to day in implementing policy on behalf of the mayor and the city council. So I have experience. That's the big benefit of me when I'm mayor of Sacramento, of knowing how the system works, knowing what the mayor does, what the council does to bring people together, to set a common agenda and ask and demand that our city staff, including our city manager, implement that vision.
Kevin, how do you plan to support small business and keep it thriving in Sacramento?
Yeah, I've talked to small businesses up and down the city, and the issues that they talk about most are the issues that voters talk about the most. They want us to address the issues of homelessness in our communities and public safety to make sure that people can support small businesses. I've talked to a number of small businesses, and they say we're losing people to Roseville and other areas in Midtown because they don't feel safe. So I think tackling homelessness aggressively, focusing on implementing our no camping laws, while conversely, finding compassionate places where people can go, is issue number one. Secondly, though, I think the city does have a role in lowering barriers. I talked about the building permit side. I also think about what we did in restaurants during COVID. We had this amazing outdoor al fresco dining. We need to bring that back without having restaurants pay $100,000 to build a permanent steel structure. You look at other cities are doing this. What can we do to help small businesses thrive in the new economy? Things have changed since COVID, and we need to adapt accordingly.
Be sure and ask if you need a little extra time. Flo?
Yes. So, just this week, I had the opportunity to sit down with some of the small business owners in Old Sacramento, and they talked about, what is concerning to them. And certainly the same issues that are affecting voters are concerning to them. But they named some that are not necessarily general voter, concerns, in part because after our state government, they are one of our largest employers in the region. And so they talked about things like being able to have the support of the city, especially when the city is their landlord. And so I know we're all really disappointed in the closure of Rio City Cafe because the city didn't do its maintenance on the property. And so not only did we lose the revenue that came in from the rental, but we also lost all the customers that were going to spend money in tax revenue. So part of what the city needs to do in terms of small businesses is make sure that when we're responsible for them, that we're not undercutting them and making their jobs hard and forcing their closures. The other part is that we need to make sure that we are actually an environment that encourages and supports small businesses, that we're We're creating economic opportunity for when we invest public dollars for them to also be able to spend more money. And so some examples of that are the Right to Start program with Victor Wong that has policies that cities can pass to be able to make sure that we have a good environment for people to be able to start their businesses and grow their businesses here, which helps expand our economy.
Flo, how do we improve livability among neighborhoods that struggle with unemployment, lack of affordable housing, and concentration of law enforcement engagement?
Yeah, livability is a big issue in all of our communities. And I think one of the ways that we are better equipped to be able to address it is by partnering with our communities and setting up plans that we can honor for how we're going to move forward. We have really strong neighborhood associations and nonprofits in every single corner of the city of Sacramento. And partnering with them to be able to hear what our residents need is a great way to move forward. Right now, I mentioned earlier the Community Health Improvement Plan that is operating in one census tract in Sacramento County. And it's a great opportunity for us to work on food access, housing insecurity, and of course, mental health. And so when we come together with community members and allow them to be in the driver's seat, we actually come up with solutions to challenges and also their priorities. Sometimes we think the big things are the first thing to tackle, but the community says, hey, we'd really like some street lights, or hey, we'd really like to be able to have an event here that brings everyone together, or hey, our big challenge is something that you wouldn't know if you didn't live in the community. So I operate by the adage of nothing about us without us, and I think one of the ways to increase livability is to increase engagement, and that's why the same thing we're doing to win this election of knocking doors and having community conversations is the exact work of local governance. We have to keep that up to be able to make sure that we are doing the right work.
Kevin?
Well, livability in our neighborhoods goes back to the basics. You want safe neighborhoods. You want to make sure the city adequately addresses issues of homelessness and public safety. So I think about our city parks. We need to make sure our city parks are clean, don't have homeless encampments, and are able for families to go engage in their neighborhood city parks. I think when I talk to residents about the issue you asked earlier about downtown, our core, they say, focus on where we live. We like downtown, that's the heart, but remember that we live in these neighborhoods. So we need to make sure that city doesn't forget these often forgotten neighborhoods. And as a council member, I did just that. You know, when a Little League lost its program, I brought the Giants to bring back a league for boys and girls to play for free in Southeast Sacramento. I'll do the same as our council member and focus on neglected areas. Two things I want to zero on some of their neighborhoods that don't always get the same treatment are adequate bike lanes and adequate tree canopies. You can go down leafy street neighborhoods with bike lanes, go to other neighborhoods that don't have the same affluence, and you can see the opposite. Thank you.
All right. One more question before closing remarks. What will you do to support and improve safety for pedestrians and bicyclists? And what does the future look like for transportation and light rail in Sacramento?
Who's first?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, this is an issue that I think a lot about when I drive around and looking at those painted white bikes where people have died. And normally they're in neighborhoods that don't have a lot of affluence. So we need to make sure that we focus on complete streets in all of our neighborhoods. You know, twice as a local leader, I've had individuals in my district die because they're hit by a motorist. And both times I fought to get money to fix those intersections. But we shouldn't have to do it after somebody died. We should focus on the front end. So I support going back to the voters to re-up our Measure A and focusing on transportation measures, but focusing on transit and complete streets here in the city of Sacramento. It's so key to address what we mentioned earlier, our climate and air quality goals, but focus on livability. In some of these communities, you know, it's not just riding a bike today because it's a nice day. It may be the only option. So it is a priority and an equity issue. It'll focus on connecting our neighborhoods and our environmental goals as well. Thank you.
I I served on our city's Active Transportation Commission. And so one of the challenges that we have in our city is that we have a high injury network. It's a network where we've actually mapped out where people are likely to be killed or severely injured. And so along that network, we see 17% of our roadways are responsible for 84% of the places where people are killed or severely injured. So not only do we know where these places are, but we've been able to hone in on them with pretty accurate precision. And that gives us an opportunity for, once again, prevention. I don't want to do things after someone's been harmed. I want to be able to set up our transportation system for safety in the first place. And part of that is making sure that we're investing proactively in the city we want to live in so that Jennifer Donlin Wyatt and our transportation department at the city have the funds that they need to be able to draw down on state and federal matches. When we don't invest local dollars, we then become ineligible for other funding that we could braid together with to be able to actually address these challenges and do some really innovative work. And so that's part of what we need to do moving forward. And we also need to incentivize people riding transit by making it really focused on some of the major large events so people can have a good experience and we can expand it and make it more efficient.
Thank you. Kevin, you have 2 minutes for a closing statement.
2 minutes. Well, first of all, thank you once again, and we'll see you soon on our mayoral debate tour. I appreciate the chance to talk to the people of Sacramento. Look, it's an important election. We have two solid candidates. I'm asking your vote because I'll be ready to step in on day one and solve our problems. I've always been a problem solver. I have experience as a city commissioner, as an assembly member, as a council member in between. I won't need training to work on these issues because you need to work on these things in tandem. Running for mayor and being mayor are two different things. The job as mayor, you need to be able to working with people to work to solve these issues in concert. I'll bring about common sense solutions to our issues like I've done my entire career. It's about working together. I've worked together with neighborhood leaders, other elected leaders on tackling issues of housing affordability, public safety, addiction, after-school programs, gun violence. I know how to deliver results for our community, and I'll do so as your mayor of Sacramento. You know, this is an amazing city. Sometimes I'm just amazed that I'm running for mayor in my hometown where we lived 10 different houses in my first 12 years in life. I drive around those neighborhoods and I think about how this city helped change me. I also remember that, you know, after high school, I flunked out and had to go to adult school before I turned it around and had a chance to serve my hometown of Sacramento. So I know that I have much more to offer to my hometown of Sacramento. I hope you will join the vast majority of our council members, board of supervisors, assembly members, congressional delegation who have supported my campaign, along with our firefighters, police officers, Central Labor Council, our building trades, our Metro Chamber of Commerce, our local realtors, because they know that I'm the candidate that can bring diverse groups together that don't always support the same positions and move Sacramento forward. Sacramento has a lot of problems, but we also have a lot of greatness as well. And I'm ready to build upon what we have in our communities to move Sacramento forward and respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Flo Kofer, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Like many of you in this community, I have experienced the joys and the frustrations of living in Sacramento. And so that's why so many of our community members said, I like the way that you are doing advocacy. I like the leadership I see, and I'd like for you to run for mayor. And what we have seen in winning the primary by 9,000 votes and winning 57% of precincts is that Sacramentans want new leadership. They are frustrated that just 5 years ago, while many people were in office, we didn't have the homelessness challenges that we're experiencing right now, that some of these things happened over the last 5 to 10 years, and that we want to see new leadership come in and bring a different viewpoint, a viewpoint that focuses on solutions, that fills in needed gaps, and that understands what it means to run a city, not just a legislative package. And that's why I'm proud to be able to have the endorsement of many of my former colleagues and also many of the people throughout our city. I have our teachers' endorsement. I have the endorsement of our Nurses Association. I have the endorsement of 7 7 Democratic clubs and many of the legislative Black caucus members who've worked with my opponent over the last few years. People who've worked with me want to work with me, and people who've worked around with other people want to work with me. And so that's the exciting part of being able to run for mayor in the city of Sacramento, is that we have diverse coalitions of people who really want change, who see an opportunity for us to do something we haven't always done, because if we do what we've always done, we'll get what we've always gotten. And what I'm talking about is bringing together the voices of people who haven't been heard. I'm talking about bringing together the voices of people who have been heard and saying, what can we do together? How can we operate in that central part of that Venn diagram where our interests align and be able to build a better city? And I think that's the opportunity we haven't taken before. Many of our policies may be the same, but our approach to being able to build a vision for Sacramento is so very different. And I'm asking for your vote, for you to be a true thought partner with me as we lead this city to be as great as we all know it can be.
Thank you. And that concludes our forum. And I want to thank you, candidates, both of you, for running for elected office and for being here to answer these questions today from voters. And voters, ballots go out the first week of October. And you can find your ballot online as well, and nonpartisan voter information about the candidates and ballot propositions by going to the League website, vote411.org. When you get your ballot, you can mail it in, no stamp required. Be sure you sign it. You can put it in a secure drop box located anywhere in the county. Doesn't need to be in your neighborhood. Or you can vote in person anywhere in the county. These drop box locations and vote centers where you can vote in person will be listed in your pink envelope with your ballot. Also, a YouTube link to this recording will be available on the League website, lwvsacramento.org. I want to thank League volunteers and the team here at Sacramento Metro Cable Television for working with us to provide voters with this good information. And voters, don't miss this opportunity to help make democracy work by voting. Good night.